Okay, here we are in Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is now working with two samples. So instead of coming from just one population, we would be coming from two populations or two groups in a population. We're looking at 10.1, number 10. So we have listening to rap music. Is rap music more popular among young blacks than among young whites? A sample survey compared 634 randomly chosen blacks aged 15 to 25 with 567 randomly selected whites in the same age group. It found that 368 of the blacks and 130 of the whites listened to rap music every day. Calculate the standard error of the sampling distribution of the difference in the sample proportions, blacks minus whites. What information does this value provide? So to calculate the standard error, we're going to look in our resource packet. Remember, standard error, we're looking at the standard deviation of our statistic. Because we're looking at a difference of sample proportions, we're going to come over here to this formula. Square root of P1 times 1 minus P1 over N1 plus P2 times 1 minus P2 over N2. But remember, in this case, we don't know what the true P1 and P2 are. So when we go to fill these in, we're instead going to have P hat 1 times 1 minus P hat 1 over N1 plus, same for our second population, so our second sample over N2. Now what P1 and P2 is given in the problem. So P1 would be the black sample proportion. Make sure you're defining any variables that you're using. And then 368 was given and 634 was given. If we plug that in, we get 0.5804. And same thing for the whites. So we're plugging in the things that we know. Now if I take this and I put it into my calculator, and I run the calculations through my calculator, I would get that my standard error is equal to 0.0264. So the other part of the question was, what information does this value provide? Now we're looking at our standard error. Remember, standard error is a standard deviation, so it should be the same interpretation that we've given all standard deviations. It's just now we're dealing with the difference in population proportions. So this tells us that in repeated samples like these, the difference in the sample proportions of young blacks and young whites who listen to rap every day will typically be 0.0264 from the true difference. The true difference is what would be essentially our mean. Standard deviation is always a distance from our mean. We're just dealing with the context of this problem. All right, now for part B. We need to construct and interpret a 95% confidence interval for the difference between the proportions of black and white young people who listen to rap every day. So in order to construct a confidence interval, we are first going to need to define our parameters of interest. We just have two parameters now we have to worry about. So P1 is a true proportion of blacks who listen to rap every day, and P2 is a true proportion of whites who listen to rap every day. We're going to do a 2 proportion Z interval for P1 minus P2. Now we're going to check the conditions that go along with that interval. Same 3 conditions as we've had all along. We still have our random condition. In this case, we know that we have independent random samples. So our random condition, we're just adding this little extra part that we have to make sure that they're independent of one another. Then we again need our sample sizes to be less than 10% of their populations, and in both of these cases they definitely should be. And then finally we're checking our n times p's and our n times 1 minus p's to make sure that they're greater than 10. N times p in this case would be 368, and n times 1 minus p would be 266 for our first population. And then for our second population we get 130 and 437. Both of those are clearly greater than 10. So we're going to use technology. In your calculator, you would be going to, exactly as you named it here, a 2-prop Z interval. Into your technology, you're going to, when it pulls up, it's going to ask you for X1, and you're going to input 368. It's going to ask you for N1, X2, and N2. And I'm pulling all of this information from the problem. and then it's going to ask you for your confidence level, and you're going to say the 95% that was asked of you. When you put all that into the calculator and you hit calculate, you're going to get out the interval 0.29947 to 0.40286. So as with all confidence intervals, I need to finish by putting this into context. So we are 95% confident. The true difference in the proportions of young blacks and whites who listen to rap music is between 0.2995 and 0.4029.